Aio aispahtipi on kimotsupinan ispamokinan anotsisikoi kimokinan istamatsokinan sokapi ikinapi mogamatapi aio kimotsupinan ninaaniksi sissanaaniksi naasanaaniksi oki kamadan sami päättäpisum. Niin.
They spoke the language fluently until they were forced to go into the parochial schools or the government schools, and then they were forced to be stripped of their natural clothes and their languages. They were punished severely for speaking their Indian languages because they had to learn how to speak English because we were uncivilized savages and they wanted us to be like them.
Our languages were broken, literally. Our languages were attempted to be ripped in half, if you may, or they were attempted to be broken in pieces and scattered. The early day mission and government schools and later public schools that advocated the erasure of Native American language were simply following the philosophy of erasing Euro languages and erasing migrant languages, and you developed a philosophy of a monolingual America, speak English or leave. And yet we're from here, so we have nowhere to go and we have nowhere to leave to, and yet our languages was caught up in the same philosophy of speak English or be considered unpatriotic.
There were actual practices and laws that prohibited the speaking of our indigenous languages. And that's a human rights violation of many, to not be able to talk about your spirit and your mental thoughts as one. And that's indeed what our languages were.
We were pulled out of the community and we were away from home for 10 years in residential school. So in that span of time, I lost that information that I should have been getting from my elders. So, but when I left the school and later on, then the interest came back, and then I really tried to catch up to what I was losing or what I've lost.
The experiences of residential schools are everything that they say they are, and then more, because we experience them. I didn't get the abuse that some of my others that went through that, but it was that being taken away from my parents and my grandparents and going a few miles away and not being able to see them for a long time. And a lot of knowledge was lost in that too, you know. But also what was being taught to us, you know. It's like these kids, my kids mean so much to me. You do everything to nurture them. You don't want to hurt them, you know. I'm never going to tell them that who he is bad or evil, or the language that he's trying to learn is bad. But you could see the psychological damage that was done, you know, for us when you were told that, you know, we had this textbook, our European heritage. You know, that had nothing to do with us.
They didn't understand us at all, and my mother's brother Ralph was taken off to Chamawa Indian School, which is near Salem. He ran away from there because they were forcing him to stop speaking his language and trying to change his way of life. He ran away. This almost makes me cry. They took him back to school and punished him, and he kept running away. And he ran away the third time, and they took him back and locked him up and only gave him bread and water. And he died there. And so many of our people were punished so severely and even killed. Like I said, he was killed for just trying to be himself and trying to run away from being punished for speaking his language, that our people feared for us. And my mother's generation, then they started speaking English because they feared for our lives and for us being punished for speaking our languages.
My great-grandmother passed away in 1940, and my uncle, who became the head of the family, said that he made a decision and told the rest of them, my mother being one, that they would no longer speak the language to us because he was afraid it would bother us in the white man's world.
I just wish my dad would have taught me more. It seems like he quit speaking. Him and my uncle can speak it really well, but they never really taught us because when they were growing up, they weren't supposed to speak it. It was forbidden. They went to Catholic boarding schools. They got into trouble for speaking their language. So, you know, for them it was important to learn English and learn it well. And so they didn't really teach us, and that's where it was kind of lost in that generation because, you know, it was learn English. You got to learn how to communicate in the white world, and that was more important. That was more of the emphasis, where now we're going back to learning Hidatsa and making that number one, and that's being taught in school.
Nitani ko kinaksapu nitsi Kainai kon. Og moksi tito taatsi maya miamskapi pikani. Ken oka I tuoja ta kita pääsupuhtsi sessa kistonno nitsi tapino kanista. Iskska no kanistoni pannakaki otsapi kono tsitsitsotos.
Why would we save our language? Well, it's simply that the language identifies who we are. The quintessential self of who we are as Blackfoot people is contained in our language.
In terms of thinking about our own survival, our own continued survival, what's gonna help us survive? I think what's really going to help above all is language preservation, because it's so rich. I can tell you my personal dream and my personal understanding of what happened after the starving winter, when so many families perished, and there may be like one survivor out of an entire family. And the dream I had was about a young woman who was probably in her 20s and a little girl who was probably about 8 to 10 years old. In the dream, I was listening to them talk to each other. They weren't related, but they were the only survivors left of both their families. And they were so sad. And they would cry and they would talk. And by listening to them, I understood through their conversation that they have no words for, we're going to give up. Let's just give up and die too. All of the words that they talked to each other while they were crying were about, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next to continue to live? And to me, language contains that hope. Indian languages contain that within them, not to give up.
My mother used to say, I can't tell you what this word means in English because it means so much more. And I couldn't understand what she said until I began to study the Hebrew language. And this one word would tell you what this means in Hebrew. Then it would refer to a number. And then you go down and it refers to other numbers till the word was full. And this word just like comes into your heart and it's full. It's like the Indian language.
Otechika was a word that was used by the buffalo. They're the ones who taught us that word. Anyway, this one buffalo bull, he was very beautiful. And one day he went and challenged the main bull to compete to be the dominant bull for the whole herd. And every year the buffaloes, they fight for leadership. It's a fierce competition. The strongest ones will survive. And they're the ones who breed the cows so they could pass on strong genes. And here just one particular year, this buffalo won, and he was just gentle, and he was well liked, he was loved, and so he won combat, so he was a dominant bull, so he lived that first year, and everybody was fond of him, the whole Buffalo Nation. They just liked him. So that second year, when it's time to compete for leadership, it was told that nobody would compete with him. And this went on into the third year, and he was standing there, he looked at all his children and all his wives and all his grandchildren, and he was just feeling so good. It was just peaceful. It was a real good time that the Pteoyate had, the Buffalo people had. And then in that fourth year, and within the buffalo herd, there was one bull. He was always just obnoxious, and everybody always has to have somebody obnoxious, and they had one too. Anyway, he came up there and he challenged a bull for combat for leadership, and everybody was just angry at him because they didn't love the main bull that they had such a good 4 years. So they went into combat for leadership, and while they're in combat, the old bull was thinking, oh, look at all my beautiful children, my beautiful grandchildren, all this beautiful way, and he should have been concentrating on combat, but he didn't. So the other bull ran beside him and ran his horn up into his heart and just dropped him. And so he knew he was dying, his life was just ebbing out, and so all his relatives came to him and, get up, come on, it's okay, you could be with us, we don't want you to leave, we love you. And he said, Hia otechi kelo. Otechi kelo means that it's all end. There's no coming back. It's all over. And it's a real powerful word. So that's the first time that buffalo said that word. That's where we learned it from.
When you own something and it becomes yours, an experience, and the kind of storytelling that we heard was exactly that. They were such good storytellers that you experienced the story because of the language. And more often than not, when I went to university, you start looking at reality completely different from the one that's dictated by my language, and start realizing, well, that's not true, especially when it's talking about our people, because you don't know the language. You don't see it from our worldview. And in some cases, so what if you don't? Because what's important is that I see it from that perspective. And those experiences that we have, and those people that pass those down over the centuries, once they're passed on to you, you own them. It's not like if I lose some notes, I'm in trouble. Or if I lose a book, I'm in a lot of trouble. They're with you, not just up here, but here too.
Language matters to each group and individual because it represents the blueprint for thinking. And as a result, it focuses how we see the world around us, how we hear the world around us, and how we experience the world around us.
We need to preserve our language, because if we lose it and we lose the culture, where do we go from here? Like, how do we get it back? Like French, the French people are very proud of their culture, but if there was a situation that they actually lost their language or their culture, there's France. They could actually go back and say, okay, this is similar to what we lived in Quebec, this is where it all started from. Whereas Blackfoot people, if that's gone, then there's no place you can go back and say, well, we want to learn our Blackfoot language or learn about who we are.
Our people say the word of mouth is sacred. It was given to us in the beginning of time, not only to communicate, but to communicate with a higher power. That's why it was given to us.
Anytime that you have a senior pallbearer and you talk to the spirit of that individual, it's generally done in the language, in the Hidatsa language, or thereabouts. It's never done in English. You try to stay away from English because that person is not English. That person's a Native American. So you relate to that language, And here again, you know, this is why it's very important that you don't lose your tongue, you don't lose your language.
It has been really devastating for our people to lose their identity through the process of being punished for trying to practice our own ways. The loss of identity of our young people is so heartbreaking, because I feel that's why the alcoholism and drug addiction is so great, because we don't know who we are. Who are we? And our folks are talking Indian maybe, and they haven't taught us, well, why?
A lot of children who didn't have grandparents to grow up with, or parents that really speak Blackfoot or know their tradition, their culture as Blackfoot people, they kind of seem to be looking for something to place inside. They become cultural blanks. But I mean, if you live on the reserve, you see children who grow up with the traditional background from traditional parents. They know who they are. They seem to succeed in life. They seem very respectful. They seem to help try and put the culture back. I think a lot of them are taking that route to wanting to know who they are. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of the younger ones aren't losing it, but in fact they're wanting to learn more.
Kakine tlenahe pa spike, kakine pe eisna. Pa saula keka, pe ulalwichna, sikam kekina.
We have a long linguistic continuum with our language, and because we're in our homeland, our original homeland, or the remnant of our original homeland, then our language has had a long relationship with the environment and the world that we live in. And in fact, it has really grown out of our relationship with the land, the Creator, and the world around us.
Because our language is actually a reflection of the ecosystem. The names of things are actually stories. Every place and every person has a story, and the story is how they get their name. And you can't take the name in isolation. You take the story and the landscape and the ecosystem part and parcel, the whole thing together. It's a whole idea, and they don't get separated. And if we separate those, if we break those connections, we have disrupted our culture even further.
They'll say, St. Joe Baldy in Coeur d'Alene means I'm sitting by the water. They said that because right now you have a lot of snow, maybe 6-10 feet snow up there, you know. And the Chamutka means sitting by the water. He's supplying water for all. He's a kind of a caretaker. That's the Indian version of it.
Place names tells a lot about the people and the place at the time. Freshwater Bay is a beautiful bay just west of the Elwha River. And it was so rich with seafood that people went there all the time to get octopus and different shellfish. There was a village there, and it was called Tukwainu, which is so pretty, Tukwainu. And it's because the treetops are bent on the tops, you know, from the strong winds. And but the story of that place is, you know, back when before contact, if there was someone who was doing something wrong in the community, you know, they were ousted. They just had to get in their canoe and leave and go somewhere else. They didn't have a, you know, where you're arrested and put in jail and go to court. They didn't have that kind of system. And so this man was very abusive to his wife, and that was not accepted in that community, and so he had to leave. And the wife is the bluff that you see there, and it's full of cracks, and that represents the abuse that she had to endure. Out in the water, when the tide is out, you can go out to this little rock formation, and that's a little girl. They had a daughter, and her name is Tanya. And she couldn't understand. She was too young to understand what was happening and why her dad had to leave. And she yearned for him, you know, when out in the water, calling for him. And as he left, he went across, and if you look from the beach, you see across Mount Baker, and that's where he went. And so it tells, you know, what was acceptable and what wasn't, and how did they handle unacceptable behavior in the community.
I think the crucial answer for us when we are asked why save our language is simply this. Intelligent people do not burn down libraries today. And languages are these enormous libraries if you look at it. And so why would we want to destroy then the largest library that contains all the knowledge, the accumulated knowledge of this tribe over thousands of years? Why would we want to destroy that? Why would we not want to preserve that? Languages are repositories of tribal thought, botany, genesis, philosophy, humor, you name it. And they require care.
Shiichnam Wianawi, Yaikshana Tush Wina Shamshnam, Manamash Wanit, Tuyainam Wachna.
We today, as contemporary Native Americans, and as we renegotiate the reality of the last 200 years under Lewis and Clark, or since Lewis and Clark, then our part of renegotiation reality means that we have to fix those languages that were broken.
There is nowhere where I can just walk out that door and go any direction in a community and start talking Mandan, and somebody could understand me and start talking back. There's no one, I don't have anyone to speak Mandan to here in a community. So I just keep that Mandan language to myself and passing it on to the young students. White hair rabbit is mahtik short. Okay.
It makes you want to learn when you see younger kids that can do it, but they're bringing it back, and so it will not be lost. You know, you got to have your language, got to know your language.
When I started taking language classes, I got to know a wide range of our elders from different families, and it struck me differently because in high school I had to take Spanish, and I really didn't get into it that much. But when I was taking something that was part of my own family and my own tradition and my own culture, it really stuck with me. And ever since '98, I've been taking language classes. When I was working full-time, I was taking them weekly, all 3 of them, but it was too confusing, so I narrowed it down to just one, and that was Walla Walla, because that was the one, the dialect that was most in need of preservation and recording, because all 3 languages are on the verge of extinction. The Umatilla is on the verge of extinction, so was the Walla Walla.
My grandmother taught me one Cayuse word, which I am so proud of. Pipolkiwa was a Cayuse word, and no longer spoken, but it meant bread.
It gives you a good feeling when you can say these words, you know. I mean, there's not very many people out here that can understand them. Our elders, they usually know them. The middle-aged people and the younger generations, though, they don't. Because of the language teachers that I take my classes with, they're the last generation of Indian people that had their Indian language spoken to them from the time they were born, through their childhood, and through their adult years. So the rest of us haven't had that opportunity. So I try to soak in as much information as I can through those classes.
You want to learn, you know, it's something that's unique to you or your people, and so, you know, you want to learn your language. You want to be able to understand what the old ones are saying to you, because they will talk to you. There are still those out there that he'll greet you by your Indian name and, you know, will talk to you. So you want to be able to say a few words to them, or at least understand.
Now that I watch my children, they're very proud of who they are. They're very proud of their culture. They're very excited to learn their language. My son will go up to older people. He's already got that protocol in him that to respect the older. He'll go up and say, "Okay, tsanadakbi," it's hello, how are you? And so they're taken back by that. But that's what he's learning at his school.
And so the students that leave here have fantastic records to date of accomplishment, and we like to think it all goes back to this very fluid and very powerful form of energy that they were part of in revitalizing and relearning this language.
When I was a student of the American Indian Language Development Institute, They looked at how children were learning the language and what effect it had on them. They do better in English. They read better. They pronounce better.
Anit nistu? Nitakitsinnik.
Our languages help children learn the English language better.
When we realized that we finally had produced fluent children that spoke very fluently, much like the play at the confluence of culture, we thanked them profusely because we weren't lying when we said this was possible, that you could save a tribal language.
The Creator gave us in the beginning of our lives to, as a gift to us from Him, like He gave every bird a song, their own unique song, and every animal their unique sounds. We also had our own unique sounds.
The best way for an Indian to express themselves is with their own language. That was a God-given gift to us, so we're trying to keep it.
Hey